The following is a paid commercial program. Unless otherwise identified, the guests on the program are employees of or otherwise represent the advertiser. The opinions expressed therein are those of the advertiser and do not necessarily reflect the views and policies of 900 CHML.
Good morning and welcome to the Building Hamilton Show with Ken Bekendam, brought to you by LegalSecondSuites.com on 900 CHML. My name's Rick Zamperin, pleased to be with you once again. So too is Ken Bekendam. Ken, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Rick. It's great to be back in studio with you. It's great to be here to talk about housing, creating housing, building up Hamilton. Everybody believes in the same goal here of creating more housing. We see that it's definitely a need. Obviously, there's lots of different ways of approaching creating housing, and everybody has their different kind of opinions on how we should go about creating housing. But we're here to help educate and teach the audience, the listeners, about what it takes to actually create housing. And to get those housing units across the finish line. To that end,
LegalSecondSuites.com is your go-to resource for information about Legal Second Suites, basement apartments, and garden suites. Get more out of your home and book a free consultation today by going online to LegalSecondSuites.com. We have, for the first time ever, a special guest in studio with us today. His name is Rod Scholhauser, and Rod is the Director of Marketing at Rock Advisors, Inc., Apartment Specialist. Rod, good morning. How are you?
Fantastic. Excited to be here. And man, great to hear this topic going live because this province, this country absolutely needs this addressed.
Rod's here for a special reason. We're going to be talking about a 3-book series all about the self-funding house. It's a great concept. Obviously, Ken, you're in this business providing those options for individuals. You can get all the information that we're about to talk about online at the selffundinghousebook.com. Where do we begin with this? I guess book number 1. This is a 3-book series. Who wants to start here?
Well, I'll chime in.
Sure.
I mean, I'll reel back the time. Rick, it was about a year ago that Derek Lobo, and I, we started conceiving this book primarily for our children. It was a passion project. We're apartment guys by trade, but our children are growing up in a world that's vastly different than when we bought homes. I'm a lot older than the current generations that are looking to buy their first house. But when I bought a house, it was 3-4 times my income. Today, when my son's going to buy a house, there's magnitudes larger. It's 10, it's 15, it's 20 times their income. Mm-hmm. So it's no wonder the younger generations are losing that dream of home ownership. And so we thought, you know what, we need to do something about this because if our children aren't set on the right path, their dreams won't come true. And that rekindling of the dream of home ownership starts with a mindset shift. That's what Derek and I came up with, is that we thought that the younger generations, and really it's not limited just by age, it can be just any first-time home buyer, is that if they think of their home differently, it's a mindset shift. Think of your home as a business by becoming a landlord. Now, you stop and you think about that for a second. It's not a new concept. It's been around for decades, and I argue many, many decades. And it's a simple concept, but it's fraught with fears. Me be a landlord? All I hear in the media is this about landlords, and it's usually not positive, right? Mm-hmm. A business owner? I've never been a business owner. And so we had to come up with a way to take it beyond a book and empower those people to ensure that they could make this happen. So it started with book number 1, changing the mindset. You can be a homeowner by simply treating a house as a business and becoming a landlord.
So that first book in the series, The Self-Funding House, is all about the mind of the individual and how they should be thinking. And you mentioned it as a business. Why aren't we doing that? And what is the big disconnect in that mindset?
I think the big disconnect is, think of it this way. How did our children grow up? They grew up with mom and dad. And I'm being very typical here. Yep. Mom and dad, maybe they both have careers. One of them has a career, but they bought a home and they lived in a home. And it was almost like taken for granted because their friends had homes, and whether it was townhouses, whether living in an apartment, whether they're, a single family home predominantly, if they're in kind of where we are here in the Hamilton region. And, that was the lifestyle. Now, all of a sudden, as they start going to higher levels of education, they start thinking about their future and they start looking at houses are how much?
Too much.
And I can only make this. And when I go away to school, and I can only earn X per year in that particular profession. And it doesn't take too much genius with a calculator to figure out there's a huge mathematical disconnect. And so how do you close that gap? And that's where that thinking of, okay, we can't sit back and wait for the government to fix this. Mm-hmm. Number 1. Number 2 is We can't sit back and wait for this career path I perhaps have chosen for it to pay me enough to afford that house. So neither one of those options are going to work. So you know what? I'm just going to give up on that dream. I'm going to rent something. And that's the mindset that's happening today, is that they're giving up that dream. The bubble's been burst. And what we're saying is that stop. You can rekindle that dream of homeownership by just simply thinking differently. Now, that is just the starting point, Rick. I mean, the thought process there's a whole bunch behind that. We can get into that. But we realized that we had to arm these people with the tools, the knowledge, the education, the confidence, that this isn't an uncharted path. This is a path well traveled, and it can be done by anybody with the right tutelage and the right leadership, and they can make it happen. So it's time to dream again is the message.
It's, you know what, it's basic balance sheet economics, right? It's taking a liability for many people, which is their home, which is a liability, and turning it into an asset, right? It's basically assets and liabilities. It's economics 101. And by creating an income producing component to your home and generating that income on a monthly basis, that is what's life transforming. Can really make a difference in your life and can really bring financial stability to your life, especially in a time that we live in where there's so much uncertainty in the market, so much uncertainty globally with what's going on. We have to take a look at our own households and see how we can make ourselves more financially stable. And I think, obviously, making your home into an income-producing asset is the number one way to do it.
This is the Building Hamilton Show with Ken Bekendam, brought to you by LegalSecondSuites.com. You're listening to 900 CHML. Rick Zamperin in with you today. So, too, is Rod Scholhauser. Rod is the Director of Marketing with Rock Advisors, Inc., and he's come up with a pretty cool book idea in terms of self-funding your home. You can go online to check out the website, theselffundinghhousebook.com, and book number 1 is The Self-Funding House, The Changing Mind Step. What's that first step in changing the mindset? Because for eons, we've had this same mindset.
I think it starts with realizing you don't have to invent it. This has been done before. The resources are going to be around you to make it happen. Because one of the neat things that we decided right off that, and it kind of goes back to, they call it moonshot thinking, Rick. And back in the 60s when the president of the U.S. said, we're going to put a man on the moon, before they even had a clue of how they would do that. And that whole idea of moonshot thinking is there has to be a huge problem. There has to be a radical solution, and you have to embed some technology somewhere in there. And today we're talking about the self-funding house. So the huge problem we have is affordability. It's a housing crisis.
Yeah.
Let's just put it that way. And the radical solution, I think this is an important part, is, and I kind of alluded to this a few minutes ago, is that, the radical solution is the private sector does it. Government's needed. They got to support it and so forth, but we can't sit back and wait on it. But the private sector, people like Ken, and there are many others in different jurisdictions, different communities that know, live, and breathe this aspect. It even circumvents, new home builders. They need to think differently too. So, there is a whole concept that, the radical problem can be solved with the private sector, with the support of, government and so forth. And technology has to be in there. And the reason I told this story is because the technology piece is that hug for the reader of the book, because reading a book can't give you everything you need to know. Now go do it. But what we've done is we've taken the book and tied it to an online resource, an online learning portal, where people like Ken and other experts in teaching people how to be a landlord, Ken's gonna have a whole bunch of courses inside this digital destination where they can learn, oh, this is what I have to do for permitting. Oh, this is what zoning means. Oh, this is how I can engage contractors if I'm putting in a basement suite in my home that I currently own. And the idea of technology is, and the reason it's going to be simple for this person is because there's a book for mindset. There's a digital destination filled with experts and expertise. They can download it, they can look at it, and now the person has confidence. Because when someone has confidence, they get confidence from knowledge. So if you give them the knowledge and they have the confidence, that only leads to one thing: action. That's what we wanted to do. We didn't want this to just be an idea. We wanted it to be plan the work and work the plan.
In regards to the mindset, there's always a wall or a challenge that many people will encounter. What's the most common one in that shifting mindset?
Well, the top of the heap is just the word fear, right? Their fear of the unknowns. If they have never seen inside their family or friends that have been a landlord, there's immediate fear, right? They're biased with stories they read about or see or what have you. And the other aspect of fear is that fear of being a business owner. Ken talked about, it's empowering when you're a business owner and you start to realize the advantages of getting that entrepreneurial mindset. It unleashes even a career that you have. You start thinking differently about your career. You start looking at your potential. You put those two things together. It's amazing, even today as I sit here with you, Rick, is that many of our clients who are very successful in the apartment development industry, guess where they started? I've heard this story time and time again from different individuals. Oh, I remember when I was young, I bought my first house and I turned it into a duplex. I turned it into a triplex. And today they're multi-millionaire, well-founded developers. So you never know. You never know what that kind of thinking will stir inside the mind of an individual. Who knows? It could be a path of a future career. I don't know.
Could be. Yeah, we've seen a lot of people, as you mentioned, just go down that route. Now, there's two other parts to this book series. One about the blueprint, another one about stakeholders. We'll get into that on the other side of the break, too. But just a little snippet of the blueprint part. Now we're getting into the nitty-gritty. Yeah,
this book is all about two words: how to. So they're going to read the book number one. They're going to get this mindset. It's like, sounds like a great idea, but what do I do next? Book number two is the answer.
It's all about taking action, right? Taking action. It's all well and good to read books. And, I'm involved in this book series. I'm not a big book reader myself, right? But you can learn stuff from books, but it's all about action. That's where the rubber hits the road. That's where massive change takes place, is by just doing it.
Yeah. And this is where a lot of people might hit that roadblock. It's like, they read book number one, they have that mindset, all right, let's do it. And okay, now what? Like, how do I get this done? And that could be a big stumbling block for some people.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? We're coming off the COVID era, and students had to experience that classroom to online. And that's what we're talking about here. It's like use online resources. And that's what we're doing with this online portal, is we're just saying there's videos, there's downloads, there's tools, and that's the confidence giver. That's your source. The book is your guide. The online piece is your encyclopedia, if you will.
Yeah. And this first book is already out, correct?
That is correct. It launched in March, and it attained #1 bestseller status on Amazon.
Nice.
And book number 2 is coming this summer.
All right. Book number 1 is The Self-Funding House. You can get more information online at theselffundinghousebook.com. And of course, get more out of your home and book a free consultation today with Ken and his team at LegalSecondSuites.com. That website, LegalSecondSuites.com. When we come back, we'll get to book number 2 and book number 3 in this series. We're also going to talk about homelessness in this community. There's a very cool co-op housing story in this city to talk about as well, and we'll also get to some CMHC stats too. This is the Building Hamilton Show with Ken Bekendam, brought to you by LegalSecondSuites.com on 900 CHML.
You're listening to a paid commercial program. Unless otherwise identified, the guests on the program are employees of or otherwise represent the advertiser. The opinions expressed therein are those of the advertiser and do not necessarily reflect the views and policies of 900 CHML.
You're listening to The Building Hamilton Show with Ken Bekendam, brought to you by LegalSecondSuites.com on 900 CHML. Rick Zamperin with you. Hey, get more out of your home and book a free consultation today. LegalSecondSuites.com is the website. Again, LegalSecondSuites.com. We have a special guest in studio with us today for the first time ever on the show, Rod Scholhauser. Rod is the Director of Marketing at Rock Advisors, Inc., they are apartment specialists and has a great book series, as you heard in our first segment, all about the self-funding house, getting more out of your home, just like Legal Second Suites catchphrase. The Self-Funding House is book number 1, Changing the Mindset of the Individual. And we just got a little bit of a first blush on the Blueprint, which is coming out this summer. So the Blueprint is that how-to. How many steps in this how-to book? Because I would assume there's many. You can do many things with your home.
Absolutely. Well, the first thing that Derek Lobo and I had to realize was that if we're going to write the how-to book, Derek and Rod aren't the guys to do it. We can orchestrate it, but, Ken Bekendam came into our life. In fact, Derek saw Ken speak live at a local show here.
Cool.
I think it was the Ancaster region here.
Yeah, the Tiny Home Show.
Yeah.
Actually, the Tiny Home Show is coming up July 27th to the 29th, Ancaster Fairgrounds. Make sure you show up.
Okay, good plug there. Yeah, and you know what? And that led us to, we can orchestrate, we can bring together resources. And so we spent time with Ken, and I think it was great synergy because, we showed him our process for writing books. I've been writing books for decades and, probably put together 300, 400, 500 books and, showed him our process. And what was great about it was if you could get Ken's brain on paper, then the readers of that book are off and running. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what we did. We spent our time together brainstorming with Ken, putting to and developing the process so that reader of the book who didn't know how to put together a home renovation project could have the confidence that we could step by step walk them through Ken's process.
So this is a chronological kind of process in terms of step one, you got to do this, then you got to do, is this how the book is kind of constructed?
Yeah, it's basically like a step-by-step kind of guide, right? It's taken all the steps that we walk through, all of the mistakes that I've made on that process in the past, and trying to minimize any sort of potential mistakes that somebody could make when they're going about their project, and just making sure that we want people to be successful. Okay, we're here to help, radically change people's lives financially through creating an income-producing asset in their home, right? And so we want people to be successful because if they're successful, they're going to be telling their family, their friends, they could be going on to become apartment developers someday. And creating, hundreds and thousands of housing units. So we want them to be successful from day one because if they fail, then it totally ruins it for them and their future family, friends, and everybody that surrounds this person, right? So this is why we did it as a step-by-step process because, like I said, we don't want people to make mistakes.
And can these steps be applied to any community? I would assume so. It's kind of the same from city to city?
Yeah, I think the real magic came from, Ken's knowledge is vast, right? And so, I'm an engineer by education, and engineers, the joke is engineers make things complicated for job security.
100%.
But true genius comes from the person that can distill things down to the simplest form. Yeah. And that's what we had to do here with book number 2, is we had to take Ken's vast knowledge and simplify it into a process that literally was you are here at step number 1. Mm-hmm. And as the book proceeds, we're showing them exactly where they are, step number 2, step number 3, to simplify it. Again, it's all about gaining confidence so that when someone reads and sees this book, they go, I can do that. And we still need those contractors. We still need those experts. We still need those professionals. But I can orchestrate this. I can put that basement suite in my house because I've got a blueprint here. This book is literally a blueprint.
Ken, are most of the steps easy?
Well, it's whenever you become confident in something, it becomes easy, or it seems to be easy to you, right? For me, being well along in my journey of experience and knowledge in this space, to me, it seems very easy, right? But that has only come about with confidence over time, right? So the whole point of this book is to instill confidence in the reader that they can do this themselves, right? And it's only by getting the confidence that it will be easy, and it is easy. It's not a very complex thing. We're not reinventing the wheel here. Mm-hmm. Real estate and creating housing units goes back to the very beginning of time. When people first walked this earth, right? They were finding places to live and create units, right? So we haven't reinvented the wheel here. We're just trying to make it an easy to understand process for people, so that they can gain their confidence and be able to just create units, right?
You mentioned, in your career early on, making mistakes, maybe, hitting a roadblock that you didn't foresee. Would this curtail that in terms of, don't go down this road because this is the way to do it?
Yeah, it does, and it does, yes, there's a lot of points in the book where, we do lay out like the basic framework or the groundwork for how you should go about it. But we're also, encouraging people to connect with, their local expert in their area. Yeah. It takes a team of people to create housing. I'm involved in some larger, development work, and it's a full team, a full roster of experts and consultants that we rely on to help create these housing units. It's no different than when you're working on a small little basement apartment. You need to have good designers and good tradespeople, engineers and architects and all these kind of people on your team. So we do reinforce the importance of connecting with local experts who've done it before. Again, you're not trying to reinvent the wheel. You're just trying to repeat what other people have done in the past that have made them successful and allowed them to create successful rental units in their home. And so that's basically, I don't know, Rod, if you want to chime in there.
I agree, because I think one of the main, if you're to pick one of the main messages, there are a few, but one of the main messages is developing that team, because that team takes it beyond your own personal capabilities. So if we spend our time in the book telling them about what that team should look like, how to find them, how to work or oversee them. And that's how you put together a project, by relying on other resources who are experts in those fields. Now, there is a little segue that if there's a do-it-yourselfer that feels they can do that, either by history or maybe their career allows them to do that, we address that. But I think the lion's share of the message is all about utilizing the resources. It becomes a project. You can do it. You can execute it. Here's where you fit in, and here's how to stay in touch with the process so you can own the process. And I think that's what a lot of confidence is. And so whether a person is totally fearful of, I have no idea how to lift a hammer, or they're all the way to, someone who builds skyscrapers, and anybody in between, they can execute this game plan with the blueprint.
You're listening to The Building Hamilton Show with Ken Bekendam, brought to you by LegalSecondSuites.com on 900 CHML. Rick Zamperin with Ken. Get more of your home and book a free consultation today. LegalSecondSuites.com is the website. Our in-studio guest today is Rod Scholhauser. Rod is the Director of Marketing at Rock Advisors, Inc. They are apartment specialists, and they have a new book series out called The Self-Funding House. You can get all the information online at theselffundinghousebook.com. And segment one, we talked about the mindset. We're into the blueprint. You mentioned fear in our first segment, that that kind of mental stumbling block, getting your mindset or your mind wrapped around this idea. Where does self-doubt come in? Is it within the blueprint, because you might hit a roadblock and think, the city's taking too long in this application. I don't know if this is the right thing. What do I do now?
Yeah, and I think it comes with experience, right? Depending upon the experience level of the person. So if we err on the extreme left, which is they've never embarked on any type of a renovation project, there could be the what have I got myself into type of an attitude or mentality. And I think that's why the book and the online portal is there, because you need that injection of confidence that, okay, you are here. You still have all this. Don't worry about this upstream stuff yet. Let's focus on where we are. Here's some expertise. Here's some examples. Imagine trying to figure out how to design that basement suite. And, a great way to look at that is what if you could just see a bunch of video and photos of examples, So I think the hand-holding comes in the form of confidence building, which comes in the form of, I can do this because of what I see here and what I have available to me. And I think when you have a team of experts like Ken addressed, having that team around you, that's also what the portal is. The portal, we're bringing a team of experts beyond even the people who are setting foot inside your basement to say, here's the bigger picture. Here's options for you. Here's why we do things a certain way. Here are some considerations. So I think that the fear goes away when the journey is painted out into a bunch of options with a clear path forward and recommendations. So I think that prevents, Rick, the mind from wandering too much, because when the mind wanders, that's when fear creeps in, because it's more self-doubt, right?
So book number one, The Self-Funding House, already out. You mentioned at the top of the charts on Amazon. The Blueprint coming out this summer. There's also a third book in this series, which goes to the stakeholders component. And now we're talking about government, cities, stakeholders, landholders, apartment builders. What does this book address just on how they approach this? Yeah,
and because it's a totally different audience. This book is actually for the municipalities, the people that sit in those seats that we elect and that they have as their support staff. It's for the municipalities. It's also for the lenders. There's a lot of we've always done it this way type of thinking. And what we're saying is we have to think differently about housing if we're going to solve this challenge. If we just keep on doing the same old, Einstein, I won't even redo that quote, but Einstein's, he figured that out long time ago, that you got to change your thinking if you want things to change. Yeah. And so the stakeholders are, and Derek and I spend a lot of our time actually talking to these stakeholders. We do it in our regular job, but we also are talking to them about this project, about the self-funding house, because the banks currently do not have products that you can walk in and say, listen, I'm buying a house or I'm putting a basement suite in. Tell me about my mortgage. And, picture buying a new house that maybe comes with a basement suite already built into it, and you go to apply for a mortgage. Well, right now, the party line is you can't count any of that income to your mortgage qualification, which is crazy. You know, there are some institutions that are saying 50%. Now, here's the great news. The great news is the winds are changing. We are now starting to hear stories out in London and one in Mississauga where banks are giving 100% credit to the rental income, which means the income of the earner who's applying for the mortgage can add that to their qualification of their mortgage. It's essential. That type of thinking is essential. That type of product is needed if this philosophy is to work further, because we're tackling rental supply, we're tackling new home ownership and affordability in one felled swoop. But more importantly, it's a quick solution. This is something that can be done quickly. You know, we're in the apartment in the apartment industry, and it takes 5, 6, 7 years to build an apartment. That's not going to solve our housing crisis quickly.
Yeah, like lenders, to speak to the lending aspect of things, like, you know, it's super important to make sure that it is a legal unit, right? Because quote unquote in-law suites, which we see a lot, you know, in real estate listings, you know, to me, that's a red flag. That's not a legal unit. But it's important to have that as a legal unit recognized by the city with the proper inspections. And this is why we're seeing more lenders give credit to those legal units, because it's gone through that process to make sure that it's properly recognized. We still see a struggle from the lenders on the detached like garden suites and coach houses, dwelling units in accessory buildings on your property. The financial lenders out there, they haven't fully embraced lending to those projects yet. And this is why we are seeing kind of there's a lot of interest in those types of units. But on the lending side, it's still a bit of a hurdle to kind of get these projects financed. Most people are just still using their home lines of credit to finance them. But, you know, as we start to educate these stakeholders, you know, and hopefully this book will help to educate the municipalities, the lenders, you know, all the stakeholders, it will hopefully get easier for us to help create these units.
How close are we to, you know, the so-called come to Jesus moment in terms of fixing the housing crisis? Are we there? Are we almost there?
I think that's a great question that begs a very difficult answer.
Yeah. And I'm talking about radical change.
Yeah.
So, you know, stuff that you alluded to.
I think the first thing to say is that the solution is multivariate. There's not one answer to solve this crisis. We still need huge apartment buildings in certain places. We're always going to need that. You know, we're here talking about the self-funding house because it's home ownership and rental supply, and it's a fast solution. Yeah. You know, I'm of the belief, and I think the industry is leaning this direction severely, and those that are in the, you know, the multifamily space, is that this housing crisis we're in is largely governed by the supply issue. We all know the supply and demand curves, you know, and it's actually rental supply. It's actually not the availability of a new house. It's rental supply. Why is that? Because a lot of the younger generations have lost that dream of buying their first home. So guess what they're doing now? They've now entered into the rental market, adding more pressure to the rental market. We're in a country that thrives on and requires immigration, and we always will be. That's how our economy is built. So you couple those two things together, we even have even more pressure on rental. And so by doing the self-funding house, we're putting more Canadians into first home ownership scenarios. That alleviates some pressure off of rental requirements, and we're adding rental space at the same time too, again, alleviating. So that's why rental supply is actually at the crux of the problem, and this becomes a great solution. And oh, by the way, it rekindles the dream of home ownership for the younger generation.
Absolutely. The 3-book series, you can get all the info online at the selffundinghousebook.com. We have the Self-Funding House, the blueprint, and also a book for the stakeholders involved in this process as well. Our special guest today, Rod Schulhauser. He's the Director of Marketing with Rock Advisors, Inc. We're going to talk about a lot of things still to come on the show. CMHC stats, the disconnect on the homelessness issue when it comes to the departments within City Hall and City Council. And coming up next, we're going to talk about what is really an amazing story about a co-op housing development or housing apartment in town on Caroline Street, in which the tenants have said, you know what, we're just going to buy this apartment building. Talk about the pros. Are there any cons? I have a question about that as well. As always, get more out of your home and book a free consultation today by going online, LegalSecondSuites.com. More of the Building Hamilton Show with Ken Bekendam, brought to you by LegalSecondSuites.com, next on 900 CHML.
You're listening to a paid commercial program. Unless otherwise identified, the guests on the program are employees of or otherwise represent the advertiser. The opinions expressed therein are those of the advertiser and do not necessarily reflect the views and policies of 900 CHML.
Welcome back. This is the Building Hamilton Show with Ken Bekendam, brought to you by LegalSecondSuites.com on 900 CHML. Rick Zamperin with you. Get more out of your home and book a free consultation today online, LegalSecondSuites.com. So, Ken, there was an amazing story recently in the news about apartment tenants on Caroline Street who said, you know what, we don't want to be rent-evicted. We don't want our rental rates to go up anymore. So why don't we buy the place? And they're undergoing this process. How out-of-the-box thinking is this?
Well, first off, kudos to these tenants for actually having the mindset. We just talked about in previous segments about how the importance of mindset when it comes to kind of creating your own financial stability in life, right? So kudos to these tenants for actually stepping up, realizing, the opportunity for them to purchase their own building, okay? So congratulations to all the tenants, for just taking that first step, right, on this path. Look, even for us professionals in this industry, it is very difficult to buy a $5 million building. Okay, this ain't easy.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not easy to qualify for these buildings. To get lenders to step up and actually finance these buildings. In the traditional sense,
sure.
Right? Yes, we understand that, this group of tenants, they're reaching out to, municipal governments, they're reaching out to CMHC, they're reaching out to other different funds out there that are going to help finance this building. But let's address the elephant in the room. These tenants aren't buying the building. This building is being subsidized by governments, okay? And so it is another form of subsidized housing, which is what we're talking about, which is what we do need more subsidies to help keep some affordable rental units in the marketplace. But obviously we don't have all the facts and they don't have all the facts. Obviously they're still working with lenders and they're trying to pull the whole deal together. It'd be very interesting to see what their individual average costs are going to be to actually hold on to this building. The landlord or the building owner is selling the building for, business reasons, right? While, to those of us that are in the industry, while business reasons is that, obviously the rents aren't covering the costs and that there's no financial case anymore to hold on to the building, right? So if that's the case, right, which it sounds like it is, because there are some long-term tenants that are paying less than $600 a month for a unit. Wow. It'd be very interesting to see for those tenants what their average cost is now going to be for them to actually participate in this co-op and actually hold on to the building, and are they willing to pay more to hold on to the building, even with the subsidies from the governments and the grants and other things that they're looking at. Their individual costs are going to go up. Right. Also for long-term building maintenance, if it needs a new roof, new boiler systems, these are large expenses. And if those large expenses do come, how are they going to divvy up the costs? What if one of those tenants who's only paying $600 a month, who can hardly afford that $600 a month, is he going to now step up and pay $5,000 to contribute towards, a $200,000 boiler upgrade system? Yeah. We'll see what happens with it, but kudos to these tenants for actually taking the step and actually moving this forward. It'd be very interesting to see.
Yeah, two of the things that I thought of in terms of the subsidized aspect of it is this going to be an annual contribution? I know City Council committed to, I don't remember what the figure was, 84,800
Yeah,
something
84,000.
Yeah. Is that an annual thing? What are other levels of government willing to contribute? What other funding is coming forward? And you mentioned it too, and this is the one that I kind of thought of, was the maintenance aspect. If someone's pipe bursts, I mean, who's responsible for that? Does everyone contribute to that? Cutting the lawn or shoveling the snow, like who's responsible for that? Are they contracting all of that out? Are they all equally paying their fair share into that? So those are some of the questions I had too.
Well, so right now, the building's being sold because there's not enough revenue being generated from the rents to cover the operating costs of the building.
Yeah.
Maintenance, repairs, mortgage, interest, insurance, right? So yes, these tenants are going to have to each individually be paying more, probably substantially more than what they're currently paying for rent. And so I think it's going to be an interesting, I think, eye-opening experience for this group of tenants to go through that process and actually fully realize and appreciate the true costs of operating a building such as this. And again, hopefully it'll be a mind shift for these tenants, which hopefully will, have wider ranging implications for the rest of the tenants out there. And for our municipal leaders to see, the true costs of owning and operating rental buildings. And, we're going to be talking about kind of some of the CMHC stats. Yeah. Well, CMHC just came out with some updated reports basically saying that, the areas where we do have rent control, those areas have higher average monthly rents in rent-controlled jurisdictions here in this country. The stats are very clear. CMHC just came out with reports on it. So that's a whole other aspect of this that, does rent control actually help the situation, or does it actually make it worse?
Interesting.
There's a lot to be discussed about that.
We'll talk about that, and we'll also talk about the disconnect on the homelessness issue in this city, and we'll do that on the other side of the break here on the Building Hamilton Show with Ken Bekendam, brought to you by LegalSecondSuites.com on 900 CHML.
You're listening to a paid commercial program. Unless otherwise identified, the guests on the program are employees of or otherwise represent the advertiser. The opinions expressed therein are those of the advertiser and do not necessarily reflect the views and policies of 900 CHML.
And one last go-round here on the Building Hamilton Show with Ken Bekendam, brought to you by LegalSecondSuites.com on 900 CHML. Rick Zamperin with you. Get more out of your home and book a free consultation today with Ken and his team. LegalSecondSuites.com is the website. Let's dive into the homelessness issue in this community, a hot-button topic. I know public hearings or public meetings are being had in terms of what to do with encampments. Homelessness, a big part of that, obviously. You feel there's a disconnect between council and some of the departments within City Hall?
Oh, 100%. You know what? All the discussion that we're seeing from City Council, from the mayor, all of these public consultations, these meetings that are taking place, I've not heard once about anything about adjustments being made to the planning department, to the building division, ways of speeding up approvals. Building permit approvals in this city, right? That's where the rubber hits the road, is when somebody brings forth an application to these departments and it goes through the approval process. It's all well and good to have these lofty dreams of, creating lots and lots of housing units. But if the actual departments at the city, don't have the same sense of urgency as City Council, we're not going to get the approvals as quickly as we need them to be. And if anybody's applied for a building permit in this city, in the last couple years, couple months, couple weeks, they fully realize how painful it can be to get a permit approved in this city. And this is no knock to our wonderful staff at the planning department and at the building department. They have their jobs to do. They're bound by, zoning bylaws and building codes and all of the policies. But look, our bylaws in this city have only grown, okay? If you look, actually, they have a binder, I think, in City Hall of like the bylaw from like the 1950s, which was like super thin. Now you look at it, it's like two big books. Same thing with the building code. It used to be like a small little binder. Now it's like two massive binders. So we're talking about increasing regulations and red tape and bureaucracy to get housing approved, right? Which just only makes it take longer to get approvals, right? We see them reforming zoning bylaws to allow secondary units and allow third units and fourth units. And Toronto has now relaxed some bylaws to allow 4 units plus a 5th unit and a garden suite, like this multiplex bylaw. What that is, that's actually deregulation of of the zoning bylaws, relaxing. That's a government getting out of the way and allowing the market to create housing, right? That's deregulation is what that ultimately is, okay? And we're seeing, when they get out of the way, housing can be built. But if the governments continue and the municipalities continue to basically, bombard applicants with all of these, insane policies, and we see it like, I'm trying to build to demolish an old rundown, single family home on Beach Boulevard and build a brand new single family home, okay, on Beach Boulevard here in Hamilton. We were probably 16 months into this permitting process with the city, and we still don't have a building permit. And every time we approach them with the application, with revisions, it's just nonstop deficiency items, like nonstop. It's like I'm shaking my head here, and I'm a professional. I know for the large part of this, I understand the zoning bylaws and the building codes, but it's constant. It's just so much bureaucracy and red tape, right? So that discussion is not being had. We're not talking about issues at the planning and the building division.
Right.
City council is all for creating more housing. Okay, why don't you walk up the elevator to the 3rd floor and to the 5th floor and start talking with staff about how can we speed up these approvals? Yeah. What are things that we can take out of the process to speed up approvals?
I would say, Ken, because it's really short and sweet, is that if there's one thing I have a wish for, and that is that the energy I put into what we're doing with municipalities, if I can just teach them one thing, and that is this: if they can learn how big of a friend the private developer is really to the municipality, then we're going to see things happen. And that's the when I'd love to see.
Right. Last one, only got about 90 seconds. CMHC stats came out. What do you glean from those stats?
Well, the biggest thing is that CMHC is basically saying that there's a lack of investor interest in the rental sector, okay, across the country. Investors, landlords, developers are just frankly not interested in creating more rental units. Why is that? Well, obviously, it's over-regulation of those sectors, right? And CMHC basically said themselves that, there's jurisdictions that have rent control, their average rent prices are higher, okay, than those areas of the country that don't have rent control. The average rent is lower. Those are clear stats. So we have to be taking that seriously and really rethinking, okay, what are the benefits of rent control, or what are the cons of rent control? Especially when we're trying to incentivize developers, investors, and landlords to be out there creating housing. Remember, the government doesn't create housing. It's individuals who create housing. It's developers, investors, and landlords, and the everyday homeowner who spends money, takes the risk, and actually creates housing. Government sets the framework for that to take place. So we have to be incentivizing these people to create housing.
Right. The supply and demand. When they're, it's very simple. Rent controls equals lack of progress. Period.
Yeah. Well said. We'll end it on that note. Rod, Ken, thanks for coming in. Get more out of your home. Book a free consultation today online at LegalSecondSuites.com. And thank you for listening to The Building Hamilton Show with Ken Bekendam, brought to you by LegalSecondSuites.com on 900 CHML.